When I first met Soames Forsyte, I thought he was a kind man. He spoke softly, dressed carefully, and looked at me as if I was something rare. I was young then, living in a small house with my aunt in London. Life was not easy, but it was peaceful. My aunt often said I should marry well, because beauty does not feed a woman forever. When Soames came into our lives, he brought gifts and promises. He said he wanted to take care of me. I did not love him, but I was grateful for his attention. He seemed strong and sure, and I was tired of feeling uncertain about the future. Our marriage happened quickly. It was a quiet ceremony in the spring. I wore a pale blue dress because I did not like white. White felt too much like a lie. Everyone said I was lucky to marry a man like Soames. He was rich, successful, and part of a respected family. They said he would give me everything a woman could want. But what is everything? I soon learned that comfort and happiness are not the same thing. After the wedding, Soames took me to our new house. It was large and beautiful, filled with expensive furniture and paintings. He watched my face as I walked through each room. He wanted me to admire everything he bought, as if each object could make me love him more. He called it our home, but I never felt it was mine. Every chair, every picture, every wall seemed to belong to him, not to me. Even the silence in the house felt owned. In the early days, I tried to please him. I smiled when guests came, wore the dresses he liked, and thanked him for the things he gave me. But I felt small, like a bird inside a cage that shone with gold. People saw the light and thought I was happy. They did not hear the quiet inside. Soames loved control more than love itself. He liked when I sat beside him at dinner, when I played the piano while he listened with closed eyes, when I walked with him in the park and other men looked at me with secret envy. He called me his wife in a way that sounded like his property. He often said I belonged to him. At first, I thought it was only a way of speaking. Then I began to understand that he meant it. He wanted to own my thoughts, my time, even my feelings. If I looked sad, he asked why. If I looked happy, he wanted to know the reason. He could not bear that I might have a life inside my mind that did not include him. Sometimes I would sit by the window in the evenings and watch the street. The carriages passed by, their lamps glowing softly in the fog. I used to imagine that each one carried a person who was free to go anywhere. But I stayed inside, surrounded by the quiet of my golden cage. Before we continue, I would love to know, where are you listening from? Which city, which country? Share it in the comments. And if you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to hear more every week. After a year, Soames began to speak about having a portrait of me painted. He said it would show the world how perfect his wife was. I did not want to sit for hours in a room under a stranger's eyes, but he insisted. He found a young artist named Philip Bossany, who was engaged to Soames's cousin, June. Soames said he trusted him to make something beautiful yet decent. The first day I met Philip, I saw something in him that I had not seen in anyone else for a long time. His eyes were full of life. He looked at the world as if it was new every morning. He spoke about light and color, but also about truth and freedom. I had forgotten that such people existed. In his studio, I felt the air was different, full of imagination and sound. When I sat for the portrait, he talked to me as if I was not only a woman but a soul. Slowly, the hours in the studio became the only time I could breathe. Philip did not ask questions that trapped me. He did not tell me what to wear or how to think. He only said, "Look this way, Irene," or "Hold that thought." And I did. I held many thoughts I could never say aloud. I began to realize that silence can hide both fear and love. As weeks passed, Soames grew impatient. He said the painting was taking too long. He did not like how often I went to the studio. He started to visit during the sittings, watching us with eyes that never rested. I felt his control tighten, invisible but heavy. Philip tried to stay polite, but his voice became quieter when Soames was there. After each visit, Soames would walk me home without speaking. His silence was not peace, it was anger in disguise. One evening, after another tense dinner, Soames said he wanted to see the portrait. He asked me to invite Philip to bring it to the house when it was finished. I did not answer. I was afraid of what might happen. When I looked at Soames across the table, I saw the coldness in his eyes. He wanted the painting not because he loved it, but because it was about possession again. If he owned my image, he believed he owned my heart. When the portrait was done, Philip asked if I wanted to see it alone first. I said yes. I stood before it and felt something break quietly inside me. It was beautiful, not because of the colors, but because it was true. The woman in the painting looked alive, but trapped between light and shadow. It was me, exactly as I felt. Later that night, Soames saw the painting. He said nothing for a long time, then smiled in a way that frightened me. He said, "Now you belong to me twice in life and in art." I turned away. He called my name, but I did not answer. Inside, I felt something change forever. I could no longer pretend that comfort was happiness or that control was love. In the days that followed, everything in the house felt tense. Soames spoke less, but watched more. The servants moved quietly, afraid of his mood. I often left the house in the cool afternoons, saying I needed air. Sometimes I went to see June, who spoke warmly about her fiancé, not knowing how complicated everything had become. Other times I walked by the river and looked at the reflection of the trees, thinking about the difference between still water and still hearts. When Soames found out that I had visited the studio again, he confronted me. He asked if I was in love with the artist. His voice was cold and controlled, but I could see fear behind it, fear that his property might escape. I said nothing. Silence was my only defense. He left the room, and I knew the distance between us had become impossible to cross. That night I lay awake, listening to the sound of the clock. Each tick felt like a step away from the life I had once known. I thought of the girl who had married him for safety, who believed peace was better than passion. That girl no longer existed. In her place was a woman who wanted freedom more than comfort, truth more than wealth. As I closed my eyes, I knew that everything would soon change. I did not know how or when, but I could feel it. The golden cage had started to crack. Before I continue with the story, please like, subscribe, share, and tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Your support means a lot. Now let's continue. After that night, silence became our way of living. Soames stopped asking questions, and I stopped giving answers. He was polite at breakfast and distant at dinner. He watched me with eyes that said everything words could not. I knew he was waiting for me to make a mistake. He wanted a reason to take away what little freedom I still had. But I had already begun to disappear from him in ways he could not see. I spent more time outside the house. Sometimes I said I was visiting June, and sometimes I said I needed air. In truth, I needed space to think. When I walked through London, I often passed by the studio. The light from the window was soft and warm, and I could hear faint music from inside. One afternoon, I went in. Philip was there, painting something new. He looked surprised to see me, but also calm, as if he had been waiting. He asked if I was well. I said I was fine, though both of us knew it was not true. He looked at me in silence, then said quietly that I looked tired. I told him I had not been sleeping much. He did not try to comfort me with empty words. Instead, he said that some cages were harder to see than others, especially when they were made of gold. I did not answer, but his words stayed with me. After that day, I went to see him again and again. Sometimes we spoke, sometimes we did not. He showed me his work, and I listened to him talk about his dreams. He wanted to build a house one day, a beautiful place full of light and space, where people could breathe and be themselves. He spoke about it with such feeling that I could almost see it. For the first time in years, I began to imagine another kind of life, one that was my own. But secrets do not stay hidden for long. One morning, Soames came home earlier than usual. I was sitting in the garden, pretending to read. He asked where I had been the day before. I said I had visited June. He smiled slightly, but I could tell he did not believe me. His smile was thin, without warmth. He said June had written to him that she had not seen me in weeks. My heart stopped. I realized how carefully he had begun to follow me. That evening, he told me we would visit June and her fiancé together. His voice was polite, but I knew what he wanted to see, the truth for himself. When we arrived at the studio, I could hardly breathe. Philip looked tense when he saw us. He greeted Soames, who spoke with cold politeness. I stood beside them, feeling as if I was watching a play I could not stop. Soames walked around the room, touching the paintings and asking questions that sounded kind but were sharp inside. Then he turned to Philip and said he wanted to see the new design the house Philip had been talking about. Philip hesitated, then showed him the plans. It was a beautiful design, open and full of light. Soames looked at it for a long moment, then said, "It looks expensive." Philip replied quietly, "Some things are worth the price if they bring peace." I saw Soames's hand tighten on the paper. He said he might build the house for us, for me, and him. His tone was almost mocking. Philip's eyes met mine for a second, and I looked away. That night I could not sleep. I knew that Soames had understood everything. From that day, the house became an idea that haunted all three of us. Soames wanted it because he thought it would keep me, and Philip wanted it because he believed it could free me. I did not know what I wanted anymore. I only knew I could not live as I had before. Weeks later, construction began on the house. Soames called it Robin Hill. He said it would be a gift to me. I watched the walls rise slowly from the ground, but they felt like walls around my heart. I visited the place a few times with June, pretending to admire the progress. But each time I went, I felt more lost. The house was beautiful, but it was born from conflict, not love. One afternoon, Philip was there when I arrived. He was standing alone, looking at the unfinished rooms. The air was full of dust and sunlight. He turned to me and said he was building this house for freedom, not for prison. I wanted to believe him, but I was afraid. I told him that nothing built on pain could bring peace. He said softly that some things were worth the risk. For a moment we both stood in silence, and I felt the weight of everything between us. When Soames found out I had visited the site alone, his anger was quiet but dangerous. He said that people were beginning to talk. He said I was, bringing shame to his name. I told him that names were not the same as hearts. He looked at me with a kind of disbelief, as if I had spoken a language he did not understand. He said he loved me, but his love was a chain. A few days later, he came into my room without knocking. His face was hard. He said I was his wife, and he would not lose me. I had never seen such coldness in anyone's eyes. That night I left the house and went to June. I did not tell her everything. I only said I needed to stay for a while. She welcomed me without questions. Soon after, news came that Philip was gone. They said he had met with an accident at the building site. The words felt heavy in my ears. I could not cry. I only sat by the window, staring at the street, hearing the sound of rain. My golden cage had broken, but not in the way I had dreamed. When Soames came to find me, I did not speak to him. He said I should come home, that people were talking. I looked at him and said quietly that there was no home left for me. He did not understand. He never could. To him, love was something to own, not something to give. In the weeks that followed, I lived quietly with my aunt. The world outside kept moving, but I felt as if time had stopped. Sometimes I walked by the river and thought about the house at Robin Hill. I wondered if the rooms were finished, if the light still fell through the windows the way Philip had imagined. I hoped so. I wanted to believe that something beautiful had survived, even if I had not. When I heard that Soames had moved into the house alone, I felt nothing but emptiness. The house that was meant to free me had become his new cage. Perhaps he did not even know it yet. I began to play the piano again. The notes were soft, uncertain, but they filled the silence around me. Each note felt like a small piece of my soul returning. I still thought of Philip sometimes, but not with pain, more with a quiet gratitude. He had reminded me that I was alive, even if I had lost everything else. That summer, I left London for a while. I went to the coast where the air was clean and the sky seemed endless. I walked by the sea each morning and listened to the sound of waves. They reminded me that freedom often begins as a whisper, not a storm. I did not know where my life would go next, but for the first time, I was not afraid to find out. The golden cage was gone, and though my wings were weak, they were still mine. Life after London was quieter than I had imagined. The sea air softened everything. The sound of waves filled the spaces where memories used to speak. I rented a small room in a house near the shore, and for the first time I woke up without fear of someone waiting to control my day. I cooked simple meals, read a few books, and walked for hours along the cliffs. I did not speak much to anyone. Silence, once my prison, had become my friend. There were moments when loneliness touched me like a cold wind. I missed the sound of a voice, the feeling of being seen. But I told myself that it was better to be alone in peace than to live beside someone who wanted to own my soul. I remembered how Soames had watched me, always needing proof of love. He had never understood that love cannot grow where there is fear. Sometimes I saw couples walking by the sea. They held hands, laughing softly, and I wondered if they truly knew how lucky they were. I used to think love was safety, but now I knew it was freedom. I had once traded freedom for comfort, and it had nearly destroyed me. Now, with nothing but my own heart, I felt richer than I ever had in that great house of gold. I wrote letters to June, short and careful. She was kind and told me about her work, her friends, and how she was learning to forgive. She did not ask questions about Philip or Soames. She seemed to know that some wounds do not need words. In one of her letters, she wrote, "Time will teach you that peace is not forgetfulness, it is acceptance." I read those words many times. As months passed, the pain became softer. I began to notice small things again, the smell of rain, the sound of gulls calling over the sea, the warmth of sunlight through the window in the morning. I had never truly seen these things before. Life in the city had been full of noise and appearance. Here, everything was slower, simpler, more honest. One evening, an older woman who lived in the same house knocked on my door. She asked if I could play the piano for her little granddaughter. There was an old piano downstairs, quiet and out of tune, but I agreed. The child sat near me with wide eyes while I played a soft melody. It had been months since I had touched the keys, but my hands remembered. When the last note faded, the woman smiled and said, "Music always finds the way back to the heart." That night, I sat by the window and thought about what she said. Perhaps that was true for life itself. Even after the hardest loss, the heart remembers how to sing again. One morning, I received a letter from London. It was from Soames's cousin, Jolyon, a man I had met only a few times. He was kind, with quiet eyes that saw more than he said. The letter was simple. He had heard that I was living by the sea and wanted to visit, not for gossip or judgment, but to bring some company. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I was not sure if I wanted any connection with the Forsyte family again, but something in his tone felt different. It was not control, it was respect. I wrote back and said yes. When he came, it was a bright afternoon. He looked older and gentler than I remembered. We walked along the cliffs and spoke about simple things, the weather, books, the sound of the ocean. He never asked about Soames or the past. Instead, he spoke about his garden and how he loved to paint trees in the morning light. I felt calm in his presence. For the first time in years, I spoke without fear of being misunderstood. He said he was planning to travel abroad for a while and asked if I would ever think of returning to London. I told him I did not know. London was a place full of memories, both golden and dark. He nodded and said quietly that sometimes the past must stay where it belongs. Before he left, he gave me a small sketch of the sea that he had drawn while I was speaking. It was simple and beautiful. I kept it on my table for many years. After his visit, I began to feel stronger. I started giving small piano lessons to children in the village. Their laughter filled my small house, and for the first time, I felt part of a world again. Teaching them reminded me of something I had almost forgotten, that giving is a kind of freedom too. Then one winter, I heard that Soames was unwell. He had moved out of Robin Hill and was living alone. His business was successful, but he had no one close to him. People said he had become quiet and strange. When I read that, I felt no joy, only a quiet sadness. He had built his life around possession, and now he was left with only things, not people. I hoped he would one day understand that love is not about control, it is about letting go. Years passed. The sea became my home. I grew older, though I did not feel old. Sometimes I walked at sunset and thought of everything that had happened, the girl I had been, the wife I had become, the woman I was now. I realized that every cage, no matter how strong, has a door, but you have to find the courage to open it. One summer evening, I went to London again for a short visit. The streets were noisy and full of lights. I passed by the old Forsyte house. It looked smaller than I remembered, as if time itself had taken away its power. Through the window, I could see the same heavy furniture, the same paintings still in their places. For a moment, I felt a strange kind of peace. I was no longer part of that world, and it could no longer touch me. I visited June, who was still kind and full of life. She hugged me and said I looked happy. I told her I was. We spoke about Philip for a while, quietly, without sadness. We both agreed that he had built something that lasted not a house of stone, but a house of memory. When I returned to the sea, I felt that my life had come full circle. I had left as someone broken and returned as someone whole. I no longer needed to escape. The world was not a prison anymore. It was open, wide, and waiting. Sometimes, when the wind was soft and the sun was low, I sat by the shore and played music in my mind. I thought about everything I had lost and everything I had found. Love, freedom, silence, peace. All of them had hurt me. All of them had healed me. In the end, I learned that a golden cage can shine beautifully, but it will never let you fly. To be free, you must give up what holds you, even if it looks like love. And that was what I finally did. I opened the door and walked into the light. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share.